how and why is a conflict kilometers away able to divide South Africa? According to Asher Lubotzky, who is a scholar in residence at the University of Houston, the attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th evoked varied responses within the South African political scene. The diverse reactions reflect the long history since before democracy in 1994 of South Africa's engagement with the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The conflict holds symbolic significance for many in the country. As Asher Lubotzky from Houston joins us now to expand on some of these views. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Israel-Palestine conflict divides South African politicians. We've seen the South African government calling for the immediate cessation of violence, restraint and peace between Israel and Palestine. Political parties like the EFF have endorsed Hamas' use of violence, drawing some parallels with the anti-apartheid struggle. The ANC also giving some bolder assertions when it comes to support for Hamas. What do such responses reveal about the historical alliances and complex perspectives on the pair?
Hello all, thank you very much for having me here. Yes, those recent reactions reveal a lot about the historical legacies of South African, different South African political players. And the ANC and the EFF, as you said, stood pretty much behind Hamas or justified or condoned the violence, while the DA and traditionalists and other Christian religious movements tended to support Israel in this conflict. This is a very there is a very long history here. The ANC actually and the PAC, the PAC, both main anti-apartheid movements, actually in the 50s and the 60s, they were much more supportive of Israel. This is something that many people do not know or realize today, but actually the ANC and most of ANC's leaders like Mandela, Sisulu, definitely supported a Jewish state. They supported Israel's right to exist, and they even saw Israel as some kind of an ally against apartheid. Those things changed dramatically after the late 60s, early 70s, and the beliefs switched towards support of the Palestinian cause and gradually became more and more anti-Israeli. In the 90s, the ANC was still conflicted, supported the PLO, supported Palestinian nationhood, but also supported, as Mandela said, supported Israel's right for secure borders. Those were his words. And in the last few, I would say the last decade or so, or a bit more, the ANC moved even more towards the Palestinian cause and even supporting Hamas, which is not exactly the PLO.
Yeah. So what would you then say in perhaps gauging another reaction or perhaps the DA's support for Israel? How much of it would you say is shaped as well by historical and contemporary factors?
Yes, this is a good question. So the DA defines itself officially as a liberal party, right? A liberal or moderate, if you want. I'm not a fan of this word, but moderate or liberal. And there is a liberal tradition in South Africa. I'm not talking about Afrikaner nationalism, right? I'm talking about the liberal, whether white or black, liberal traditions. Those traditions tended to be very supportive of Israel. From the beginning, there is also a relatively large Jewish presence in those traditions, a South African Jewish presence, right? That tended to pull towards support of Israel. Unlike Afrikaner nationalism, or white Afrikaner nationalism that had complex relations with Israel, there was a lot of anti-Semitism among Afrikaner nationalists. The liberals almost always saw Israel as kind of a democratic part of the West, right? A democratic country that treats minorities pretty decently, according to their view. And you see really here also the legacy of this kind of a more Western liberal point of view and seeing Israel within this kind of world, as you see also nowadays with the governments in the United States and most of the West.
Yeah. So how much do the diverse perspectives of South Africa's political parties on Israel-Palestine also mirror their distinct international allegiances?
Yeah, this is another great question. So the other conflict that we had in the last year and a half was the war in Ukraine, Russia's war on Ukraine. And as we saw there too, the ANC chose to pretty much support or sympathize with the Russians. And this is also a clear legacy from the anti-apartheid era when Moscow, right, the Soviet Union back then, but now Russia supported the ANC, heavily supported the ANC, and of course opposed the apartheid regime. And here we really see this thing of kind of a loyalty, kind of like historical loyalty. It's not necessarily kind of, I believe, not reflecting justice, right? The war on Ukraine, I personally believe, is a crime, but the South African government, I believe, out of geopolitical and historical loyalties, picked sides and showed solidarity with Russia.
Yeah, we saw that as we also tried to get the different views of the DA and the ANC when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine matter. I mean, the messaging was very different, almost speaking to one country with the two different voices.
Definitely. So we see it. We saw it historically, but we also see it now. And this is also kind of reflecting the vision of where South Africa should be in terms of global alliances. Should it be closer to the West, to the United States, free market, or should it in liberal politics, or should it be closer to more non-Western alternatives, which are not uniform, right? There are many non-Western alternatives, but they are less focused on, I would say, the language of liberalism or in its Western terms, right? Yeah. So really you have this clash, this global clash coming, manifesting itself now in South Africa.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing on this. Asher Lubotzky from the University of Houston there, speaking about why and how a conflict miles away, kilometers away, is able to shape and perhaps bring differing views within the political parties in South Africa.